topic for today's discussion is transforming traditional agriculture, Schultz theory. For quite some time after World War II, peasant behavior in less developed countries was considered unproblematic. There was a general consensus that peasants were not economic men in the sense that they tried to maximize profits as postulated by mainstream economic theory. Instead, their acts were assumed to be governed by tradition or conservatism, which by and large had nothing to do with the type of maximizing or minimizing behavior which acquired prominence in economic theory. Their ambitions and horizons were thought to be limited in such a way as to render standard economic theory inapplicable in the study of peasant behavior. The discussion focused on the inert or lazy peasants. However, by the 1960s, it became apparent that this position had little basis in third world countries. Peasants were found to respond to economic incentives of various kinds. Conservatism was out and rationality was in. Apart from the various empirical investigations, which gradually produced a more stable foundation of actual knowledge for the study of peasant behavior, there was one book which did more than others to change the views of the economists. This book was Transforming Traditional Agriculture by American economist Theodore W. Schultz. Schultz was awarded Nobel Memorial Award in 1979 largely because of this book. This book is considered highly controversial and has provoked a lot of criticism from many quarters. This is because it advances a theory which is intuitively very appealing in that it appears to contain many common sense elements, but which can at the same time be interpreted as very strictly formulated, even excessively so if taken literally. In this lecture, we shall try to give an outline of the main elements of the Schultz theory and of the policy prescriptions that Schultz drew from it, and look at some of the most important criticisms that can be advanced against it. So traditional agricultures are considered to be having some misconceptions. What are those? Schultz actually tried to dispel some of the wrong impressions about this type of agriculture. According to him, traditional agriculture has nothing to do with the traditions of a society. He believed that agriculture can become traditional in any country, irrespective of the customs and conventions which its people have generally practiced. It is not necessary that only a conservative, superstitious, and a whimsical society can have traditional agriculture. Even a forward-looking society can find its agriculture to be traditional in nature. Schultz feels that most of the factors that influence production, for example, thrift, attitude to work, industriousness, etc., are not affected by the cultural traits of a society. These are, in fact, economic variables. People do not save for investment simply because the methods of production do not give a high return. Again, people do not work much because the return to labor is rather low. Accumulation of more capital or use of more labor are thus governed by economic factors and not by the cultural factors. Secondly, traditional agriculture has nothing to do with the institutional arrangements in a country. A country with any type of institutional arrangements can find its agriculture being traditional. For instance, agriculture in a country can become traditional whether it has large farms or small farms, though normally people feel that traditional agriculture is associated with small farm. For example, Japan's agriculture cannot be considered to be traditional even if the farm size is very small. Similarly, traditional agriculture can be found both in countries with a high degree of owner cultivation or with a high degree of tenancy. Schultz further points out that the technical attributes of the factors of production in an agriculture do not determine the character of agriculture in a country. That is, whether it is traditional in character or not. Generally, it is felt that if the factors of production are highly productive, its agriculture can be called modern, and if the factors of production have low technical efficiency, it is called traditional agriculture. Schultz, however, doesn't agree with this assertion. For him, traditional agriculture has some economic features, and if these features appear in an agricultural system, even with technically efficient factors, it will become traditional in character. According to him, under certain circumstances, even American agriculture, which at present is considered to be the most advanced agriculture, can become traditional. According to Schultz, what is traditional agriculture? Schultz feels that traditional agriculture is an economic concept. It can be treated as a particular type of equilibrium. Viewed ex post, it is an equilibrium at which agriculture gradually arrives over a long period of time, provided certain conditions prevail. The critical conditions underlying this type of equilibrium, either historically or in the future, can be as given below. Number one, the state of the art remains constant. The state of preferences and motives for holding and acquiring sources of income remains constant. And lastly, both of these states remain constant long enough for marginal preferences and motives for acquiring agricultural factors as sources of income to arrive at an equilibrium, with the marginal productivity of these sources viewed as an investment in permanent income streams and with net saving approaching zero. Obviously, these are very strict requirements. What they mean is that the factors and methods used in traditional agriculture have been used for many generations, and very few alterations of the factors have taken place over the years. The knowledge used in farming is a knowledge that has remained more or less constant for one or more generations. The period of trial and errors is over. The technology is given, so are the preferences and motives governing behavior. The reason pointed out by Schultz is a very simple one. If for no other reason than that it is difficult to conceive of developments that could change them. The rate of return on investment in this type of agriculture is considered to be very low. As the agricultural sector undergoes the stabilization process, the profitability of investing in traditional production factors gradually falls. After a while, something like a stationary state is reached, no new factors are being introduced, and the productivity of the old ones is known. For this type of traditional agriculture, Schultz advances his central hypothesis. The farmers in traditional agricultural sectors, since nothing has disturbed the equilibrium for a long time, go on cultivating the same crops year after year with the help of the same production factors and the same methods. The hypothesis is that there are comparatively few significant inefficiencies in the allocation of the factors of production in traditional agriculture. This is shown by the very repetition of the pattern year after year. Main characteristics of traditional agriculture as defined by Schultz are as: number one, there is allocative efficiency in traditional agriculture. It is normally felt that the resources in traditional agriculture are not optimally allocated. However, Schultz's definition leads one to conclude that resource allocation is perfect in traditional agriculture. Schultz has pointed out there are comparatively few significant inefficiencies in the allocation of factors of production in traditional agriculture. There are a few assumptions for the state of perfect allocation of resources. First assumption is about the nature of factors of production. The factors have been used for a long time without any change. If the factors change in their nature, their returns will also be changing. As a result, long-run equilibrium cannot be achieved. In fact, agriculture cannot be considered as traditional if the nature of factors of production goes on changing. Number two, no significant activity like construction of roads or digging of a canal is taking place. Such activities will disturb the equilibrium temporarily. Events like war, partition, or recruitment of labor in the army also disturb the equilibrium temporarily. These are assumed to be absent. Relative prices of various factors as well as of agricultural products are assumed to be constant. Number 5, as the state of the art is assumed to be unchanged, the change in the technology taking place at any time is ruled out. Number 6, there are no indivisibilities. And lastly, there is a perfect knowledge about the return to various factors. So from the above, Schultz has given another hypothesis which is known as the poor but efficient hypothesis. According to Schultz, people in traditional agriculture are no doubt efficient so far as the allocation of resource is concerned, but they are still poor. According to him, optimum allocation of resources fails to ensure a high income level for the farmers. This is because the returns from the resources themselves are quite low, or the cost of income stream is rather high. Precisely because of this, Schultz had advocated for changes in the nature of factors of production in order to transform traditional agriculture. From the fact that the allocation of resources is perfect in traditional agriculture, Schultz deduced some important conclusions. Number 1, there is no possibility of increasing agricultural production by reallocating the existing resources. Farmers have perfect knowledge about the returns from these resources and are already getting the maximum output from their use. As there is no wasteful utilization of these resources, no additional output can be produced if these resources are reallocated. Number 2, no factor is unemployed in traditional agriculture. Number 3, the hypothesis leads to the conclusion that even in traditional agriculture, there is no dearth of efficient entrepreneurs. Number 4, the hypothesis also implies that farmers in the traditional agriculture too are quite responsive to price changes. This is because perfect allocation of resources is not possible unless the producers are sensitive to price changes. This conclusion is very important because generally it is believed that farmers in traditional agriculture are totally insulated from the effects of changes in market forces. Now we move to the doctrine of zero value labor, which is considered to be one important characteristic of traditional agriculture. According to Schultz, there is no zero value labor in traditional agriculture. Existence of zero value labor in agriculture means that if some seemingly active laborers are shifted from agriculture to other sectors in an economy, or if they are simply asked not to work in agriculture, the agricultural production will not suffer at all. And this is despite the fact that all the workers engaged in agriculture are assumed to be equally efficient. The reason for no change in agricultural production, even after these laborers have ceased to work in agriculture, is that their marginal productivity is equal to zero or even negative. Schultz, however, has questioned the existence of disguised unemployment or zero value labor in such economies. In order to elaborate his view, Schultz referred to the three economic situations in this regard, where marginal productivity of labor engaged in agriculture is very low, but is quite comparable with that of labor engaged in other sector, after cost of transfer of labor is taken into consideration. Such a situation exists in many backward economies. Number 2, where marginal productivity of labor engaged in agriculture is lower than that of labor engaged in other sectors of the economy, when cost of transfer of labor is taken into consideration. It may otherwise be quite high. This is what we find in developed economies. This implies that there is excess of labor in the agricultural sector and that should be transferred to non-agricultural sector. Marginal productivity of a part of the labor engaged in the agricultural sector is zero. Schultz doesn't believe that the third situation exists in a traditional agriculture. According to him, marginal productivity can be very low, but it can never be zero, and any transfer of labor from the agricultural sector to non-agricultural sector will always reduce total production in the agricultural sector. Schultz had tried to provide evidence to prove that there is no zero value labor in traditional agriculture by citing two examples from Latin America, wherein labor was withdrawn from neighboring farms in order to meet the increased demand for labor for construction activity at the nearby site. Schultz found that as a result of withdrawal of labor from agriculture, in the two cases, agricultural production in these countries declined. Thus, Schultz concluded that marginal productivity of labor engaged in agriculture is positive. Schultz's suggestions for transforming traditional agriculture. Although there are various ways of increasing production, for Schultz, the problem of transforming traditional agriculture is basically a problem of creating new investment opportunities in agriculture. And this is possible only when the equilibrium of the traditional agriculture is disturbed through the introduction of new and more productive factors of production in agriculture. This also implies that the art of cultivation will undergo a change. According to Schultz, agricultural transformation will follow only a technological transformation. And technological transformation, as per Schultz, implies the introduction of some new factors of production or of some new agricultural practices or of some new skills, and sometimes even dropping of some of the factors from the process of cultivation. In order to ensure that more efficient factors of production are used by the farmers for transformation of traditional agriculture, Schultz has given a number of suggestions. We can look at a few of them. For example, market approach versus command approach. Market approach implies that the farmer should be let free to decide whether to use a particular factor of production or not. The adoption should be guided by the market forces. The responsibility of the government under market approach should be confined only to measures for development and distribution of new agricultural inputs, publicity about them, development of necessary skills through education and training, provision of cheap credit, and such other measures. But in no case the farmers should be compelled to use new inputs. By command approach, Schultz refers to a system in which the government supplies a new factor of production to the farmers and direct them to use it irrespective of its profitability. The farmers do not have a choice in this regard. It is the state that takes the ultimate decision about what to produce, how to produce, and how much to produce. According to Schultz, market approach is better than command approach. He feels that if a factor of production is voluntarily adopted by the farmer, its adoption will be widespread and with full enthusiasm. On the other hand, forced adoption not only ignores the problems faced by the farmers at local level, but also at times spoils the skills and enthusiasm of the farmer. Schultz feels that the situation in a command approach can be compared to an absentee landlordism, where the landlord knows nothing about the problems and difficulties of the actual cultivators, but insists upon a good harvest. How does the transformation process happen? According to Schultz, the whole process of transformation can be explained in terms of supply of and demand for the new factors. It has to be ensured that on one hand, the new factors of production, which are really more profitable than the traditional factors so far in use, are made available in the market, and on the other hand, the demanders of such factors, that is the farmers, who are so far using the traditional factors, are willing to accept them. Only then these factors will be actually used in agricultural production. On the supply side, the ultimate object is to ensure that the new factors are available in sufficient quantity, and that too at reasonable prices. Both these conditions are necessary for their effective use and profitability. According to Schultz, three important steps in the process are in the form of research and development of new inputs, distribution of new inputs to cultivators, and development of extension services for the new inputs. Supply of new factors will be of no use if the farmers do not demand them. Schultz therefore analyzes the factors which should be kept in mind while trying to ensure that a demand is generated for the inputs. He then points out that the basic factor favoring the use of new inputs is purely economic in character. It is the profitability of the new inputs that will generate a demand for them. And profitability of a non-traditional input, according to Schultz, depends upon two factors. Number one, the prospective yield, and number two, the supply price of the new input. According to Schultz, if the present yield of the input is extremely high, farmers are likely to accept the input even if they discount the future yield at a higher rate. For the second factor, the farmer will discount the yield from the inputs over its lifespan and then compare it with its supply price. If the discounted value of the prospective yield is more than its supply price, the farmers will consider it profitable to accept the input. So, Schultz suggested that whereas the prospective yield from the input should be quite high, its supply price should be quite low. Schultz in fact suggested that in the initial stages, it may be desirable to subsidize the new inputs so that they appear profitable. In the same vein, he suggested that if the tenurial arrangements are good, acceptance of the new inputs will be easy. It is to be noted that availability of a new input and even its acceptability by the farmers may still fail to produce the desired results. Additional knowledge and skills are required for the use of new inputs. If the farmers are not imparted the necessary knowledge, or if they themselves are unwilling to acquire it, the new input may not be used at all. This becomes more important when the new inputs happen to be technically far superior to the existing ones. This is the reason why Schultz lays emphasis on the acquisition of knowledge and skills while suggesting various measures for transforming traditional agriculture. Out of various methods of imparting knowledge, Schultz gave maximum focus on providing school education to the farmers. He considers this as an investment in human capital and cites the example of Israel and Japan to prove that schooling contributed tremendously to the increase in agricultural production in these countries. So while Schultz's theory has made important contributions for transformation of traditional agriculture and for that matter rural development of the countries, the theory is not free from its limitations. Some of them are as number one, Schultz's assumption of perfect allocation of resources in traditional agriculture is not supported by empirical evidences. Generally, resource allocation is imperfect whether agriculture is traditional or non-traditional in character. Schultz's view about no zero value labor in traditional agriculture has been challenged both on theoretical as well as on empirical grounds. On the empirical front, studies by Majumdar and Desai, by Miller and Steven, and by Rosenstein, Rodan, etc. have shown that disguised unemployment exists in agriculture in the underdeveloped countries. Schultz's undue bias for market approach seems to be away from economic reality. In the initial stages of agricultural transformation, the state may have to undertake many other activities in the form of controls and intervention than what has been suggested by Schultz. The limited resources of an economy can be best utilized only if these are properly planned and regulated by a centralized agency. Schultz has totally ignored the role of institutional reforms. In the transformation of traditional agriculture, this constitutes a serious omission from the thesis. The theory has also totally ignored the differences in various poor economies with reference to their factor endowments, infrastructure necessary for development, degree of commercialization, extent of monetization, administrative efficiency, etc. These differences do affect the extent of final use of the new input. To conclude, Schultz's theory of transforming traditional agriculture offers valuable insights into how agricultural systems in developing countries can be modernized through investment in human capital, education, technology, etc. While many of his suggestions are still relevant today, particularly in terms of promoting agricultural extension services and infrastructure development, his theory doesn't fully address the complexities of environmental sustainability, political factors, or the importance of gender equity in agricultural transformation. Nonetheless, Schultz's work remains foundational in agricultural economics, offering a blueprint for improving productivity and economic growth in rural areas across the globe.